Hello and welcome to another episode of Hosk CRM Dev. Last week I noticed I didn't really do a kind of a plugin development type episode, so this week, I shall be rectifying that. We're going to continue on with our simple plugins, and this one we're just going to do a create on the post of an account and just create a follow-up task. This is different from our previous plugin, which was an update and was a so before the database transaction had been done. This one will be after the database. So after the account has been created, we'll then create a task. And this is a simple task to basically follow up contact with the account 2 weeks after you've created it. So the kind of scenario would be a new account has been created in the CRM organization, and then you should get one of your sales guys or someone in your company to kind of follow up to check that they're happy and if they've got any issues you need to resolve. So we'll go in, so you open up your Visual Studio and you've got your previous, we've got one plugin there on the update. And so what we're going to do is go to Account. We're going to create a new plugin. If you haven't watched the previous videos, I would recommend you go in the plugin playlist and go through those. That will sort of help you, maybe the foundations. Basically, you need to set up your CRM trial, set up your developer toolkit, and perhaps check the previous update plugins so you get an idea. And so, okay, we're going on message create and calling user. Yeah, we're going to be a post message this time, and I think that is it. Synchronous. I'm not worried about that. I'm not really worried about. You can't actually filter attributes because on the create they're all new, so there isn't any limitation as to what you're firing off your plugin on. You can in the code obviously say if you check for particular values, if they have a value, if a field has a value, then do something, but you can't use the kind of filtering attributes here. So we'll press OK, and this will create, changes our register.crm register file as usual, and it creates a new class for us here. I'm accepting the default values at the moment really because they're fine, but if you start to have a bunch of these, then you need to give them kind of more logical names so you can sort of manage and understand what you've got there. And this week I'm also going to add in a folder to kind of tidy this up a bit, because basically I like to have, this is the code that's been created, and then I like to have the actual class code in a separate, so the plugin code will just be there called and run that, and the actual logic code I like to keep in a separate class, because later on I'll sort of go through this, but this helps you test. It's easier to test a separate class, and then you don't have to worry about creating kind of local plugin contexts and various variables. What I usually do is call my class, pass in the CRM organization service and an entity, and then I do all the logic using those, and that makes it easier to test and kind of manage your code and reuse it, in fact, because you can just use the class and then call that class from here. So like all good developers, let's first, what we're going to do is we're going to take the code that we've previously used and kind of update it a little bit, because we don't really want to keep creating code from scratch all the time. Developers don't like to do that really. So first we'll create our class, just a basic class, there's nothing special about this one, and we're going to call this what are we going to call this? So create, maybe account, create follow-up or something like that. So we've got my little class there. Sure if you need to make it public, but just in case. And so here we're going to do, so then here we want a function, account task, and we're going to want this on one of these, and an entity account entity. So whereas before we had all this code here, I want some of this. Probably this bit, I think. Oh dear, not quite. Now here it'll go, I don't know what entity is. That's very true. So it won't know what, because our new class hasn't got any kind of references to the CRM DLLs. There you go. Wake up, Ben. We need to do some bit of resolving here, and okay, so we don't need this. In fact, I don't care that it's an account. We're not triggering it on that this time. So what we do need to do actually is take, so from our to-do here, we need to take the plugin service, and I want these checks. I want this, I want this. I want to check it's an account. So take this into our plugin code, so similar to this, put this under there. I need to check my I'm missing one of these. There we go. So you're just watching me a bit here today, but so we've created our default kind of plugin, and you'll do this a lot. Basically, our default plugin kind of gets the context, and it gets the hibernation service. Often you want to check that it's got a target, so it's actually got a variable of the entity variable in the context parameters. We're then going to sort of convert this entity, take it out of the context as an object, cast it into an entity, check. I want to check that this is an account, and then if it is an account, we're going to create one of my new class. So then we call our task, and then in that task we're going to pass in the service and the account entity. So this will only get called if it is a entity of type account, and you can check if it's. You can check also if it's actually of a create message. So if you wanted to, you could also say not only is it an account, but is the context message create. And so if, I mean, this you'd have this if you had the same plugin running on an update and running on a create or other delete or status change, then you could have this plugin here, this code little if check, to say if it's a create then do this one, and then maybe if it's an update you'd do something else. So that means you could sort of share the same code and use it multiple times. We're going to add it in. Obviously we know that this is really going to called on the create because it's got its own kind of class and own plugin. So but I'm just sort of showing you there that the possibilities. I mean, you can see here by splitting up the logical code here, it keeps it a bit easier to, there's less code to look at in just so you've just got a class with some methods. You know that that's all the code that does stuff, and whereas in the actual plugin code, you know, you've got these other bits and bobs happening, but you don't really need to know about those. There's a debate really I have sometimes with my colleagues whether you should put this stuff inside the plugin or whether you should check it here. I personally, this context type stuff, I think I'm happy to leave it with inside calling the plugin, and I just like the code that does things to be inside the kind of the class there. But you know, it's all personal preference, I guess. Right, so I've created some simple code here just to create a task. It's a bit unformatted. Two main brackets. Right, so simple code. All it does, basically, we come in, we create a new entity of type task, and then I called it contact account task. We have a subject. We write a little description there. We have a description and schedule start, schedule end, and regarding. So I've just opened up CRM here. If we just check on the tasks to show you what kind of data we are creating programmatically. So go to accounts. So we can add a task, and so you can see here you've got subject, description, priority, so it's limited actually to what I can see there. So I'm just going here to look at it to see, it'll show all the fields here. So you can see here on that other view it didn't show the regarding, but you've got a subject, you've got a description, and you've got regarding. And you do have kind of due date as well. So actually looking at this and looking at the code, where can I see my... So if we go to the form, I think we only need due date, and I think my previous example was taken from CRM 2011 type task. So well, we just get rid of that. So here, let's see what, oh, schedule end date. Okay, so that is right. Okay. Well, let's keep those in then. See, this is what you have to do. If you don't have strong typed plugins where you've kind of already created the reference links and you can see what variables are inside your plugin code, you have to look them up like this. So here we can see that the due date is actually scheduled end date, and that's what we want to create. So, and the description there, subject. So looking at that, I think we should be good. And you can see my test one, we've got subject, we've got regarding, we've got description, and we'll have a date there, scheduled end date, as we've just learned. So this should create a task for me. So we create a task, we give it a subject, a description, we add a date, and for this one I want it just to be 2 weeks in the future to create this task for someone to kind of follow up. And here, an entity reference. Entity references are used in CRM. They are kind of like, they're basically lookups to an entity. And for this, you need to pass in fact, if we create a new one, just to show you what. So here, you got two options. It wants the logical name of the entity, so for this case it's account, and it wants the GUID, the ID. So here the account entity, the one passed in, this is the one we want to reference in the lookup of the task in the reset regarding. So that's how we've got that, and this the big ID there. And then we set, once I created my entity reference, I then set it onto my task as the regarding object ID. And then finally I do this service. So I'm using my service, the organization service, to create, and then you pass in an entity. So we can see that here as well. So So it wants an entity to pass in, and it'll create that for you, which is good. And don't create any GUIDs for it. Let CRM, the SDK, do that for you. So that looks good. He says fingers crossed. So now we'll build. To build there, that succeeded, and we're going to just check that my create, so it creates our new class entity and then calls the method. Let us now deploy. So we watch eagerly here as the deploy is started. It should tell me that it's done, updated, and we're going to see that it's been deployed to our target CRM system that we've specified in our tools. I'm assuming basically that you've been following my plugin tutorials and that you've set your CRM development up already, and so yep, that's been deployed, and it updates the register file CRM register. It does this basically, it adds in, when you create a new plugin here, it creates the line for you. The GUIDs are blank, but now once it's gone in and sort of successfully registered the plugin on the database, it will now come back with the GUID for our new create synchronous. So that's now got a GUID in there, and we should be able to see if we go into plugins, then here, and we can see it's got a create, and you could see and edit your steps there if you wished. So that's now been successfully deployed. Now we want to test it, so we go to account, test create plugin, pretty much all we need to do. Bing maps, off it goes. Now we save that. And see, here we go, our account has been, so on the create of our plugin, on the create of our account, it's gone in and it's created our new task here, and it's got a due date of the 5th of the 10th, so today's the 26th, so if we go, so this is an American date I've got set here by the looks of it. So it's the 10th of the 5th, as we would say in England, properly. So it's set our due date for a couple of weeks in the future, and it's got check new account is happy, make contact with a new customer, see if they're happy. So that's all good. It worked on my first go. That's pretty, I've got to be happy with that. So let's have a quick recap. So we created our plugin. I was just saying before, I expect you really to have set up your CRM Dev Toolkit and registered it to your CRM 2013 trial. These were in the previous episodes. And then we've got our kind of default plugin code really that goes and gets the context and the service, and you could have one for tracing, I guess. If you wanted tracing, you might have to create a new variable to pass in to log in the tracing. So here we're checking the context, making sure there is an entity inside the context info parameters, making sure it's an account, we're making sure the message is a create. Just kind of showing you that in case you were to do an update. And then now we've got our plugin code, so this is the kind of meat. So it's always good to put press 3 backslashes and it creates a kind of little part thing for you to describe what's going on. So code to create account task for new accounts. Right, and so then it just goes in, creates our new account task, and we fill in some details. We put the date for 2 weeks in the future. We then get an entity reference with a link, and we're getting here, you can see this is our new account entity that has been created, and because we're on the post event, it's basically after the account. This plugin is triggered after the account has been successfully created, and this is the kind of stuff we do afterwards. So you could do some validation here, but you won't stop anything because the database action has already happened. So basically we're just linking to that account entity, and then we're using the CRM service, the iOrganization service, to create this, and we're passing in kind of that new entity we've created, and then it will fill in any values. If any values you haven't passed in, it will kind of give default values or leave them blank, and it will create a new GUID for you, and that just runs through without problem, which is all good.